Thought I was about to have to start making jokes or something.
Now that we got them out of here, all right. So 1 Samuel chapter number 22. I actually had a young guy a few weeks ago ask me about this subject and was just saying that he was struggling, and he asked me, he's like new to the Bible. He's like, does anybody in the Bible ever struggle? And I was like, did anybody in the Bible didn't struggle would be like the bigger question. And 1 Samuel chapter 22 is where we'll begin tonight. 1 Samuel 22, verse number 1. Then came David to Nob to Abimelech the priest, and Abimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? And David said unto Abimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such a such place. If you know this story here, he is, although I told you guys 22, didn't I? We're starting hitting 21. David we're going to get to 22, but David is fleeing because Samuel is trying to kill him. Now, why I wanted to read 21 was this. 21 is, he begins by lying. He begins by twisting truth. David is in a bad place. He's actually been around King Saul, who, if you know the story of King Saul was being tormented. He was being tormented by an evil spirit. And if you remember in the story, it kind of tells us how powerful music can be, and really particularly just singing praises to God. But he would bring David in, and David would play, and King Saul would find peace. And so King Saul had come to this place where, and David is having to flee. I would say that he's been around King Saul. Now let's jump out chapter 22. It says, David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented gathered themselves unto him, and he became the captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. Now, I say all this just to point out this. David was then surrounded by who? The people who were in debt, which that's probably all of us. He was surrounded by the people who were distressed, discontented. I believe all of this stuff takes a toll on David, because if we go over and read in Psalms 13, he is running around, running for his life. He has surrounded himself with discontented. I don't even want to say he surrounded himself with. This is who the Lord sent to him. And so he is fleeing, from like King Saul killing him. He's hiding in caves. If you just look at his life, like his life is not what he thought it would be. He just thought he would do right, live a right life, make right decisions, and everything's going to go good for him. I would say that for many of us in here today. You just think, if I follow God and I do what's right and I, do whatever's right before me, that everything in my life's going to go good. And David, that's not how his life went. I will tell you this. If you just read and study your Bible, you'll find that these distressed people, I would call them the flunkies, what in our day we would call them the losers of the people who were by the end of the book of Samuel, they're calling them David's mighty men. And so you see that God can turn people's lives around. But really, let's flip over to Psalm chapter number 13, verse number 2. He was asking me, he's like, do other people struggle like me? Psalm 13, verse number 1. This is David's like thought and prayer. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? That's his cry is, God, are you gonna forget me for forever? I feel alone. How long wilt thou hide thy face from thee? How long are you gonna hide from me? How long's our relationship gonna be in this place? He says this in verse number 2. How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? Do you see David is a troubled man? He is a man that has sorrow in his heart daily. It's not sorrow that is here and gone. It is he feels alone. He feels like God has turned his face from him. It feels like God has turned his back on them. His heart is broken. He says this in this next part of this verse. How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? How long is this for us in this present day? How long is this situation or this person going to be over me? How long is this going to happen? He says this, consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. He's like, God, I need some peace in my heart. I need some rest. You see this, what I love about David is that when you really read the Bible, you get an honest look that people have struggles. Sometimes you think you're the only one. A lot of times Satan would like us to believe that you're the only mom struggling, you're the only wife struggling, you're the only husband, or you're the only young man here at this church who just struggles with whatever it is, whoever you are, whatever group you're in. Satan wants you at that place. David has gotten to this place. He says in verse number 5, but I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord because he hath dealt bountifully with me. I want you to see this. Did David get better between these verses? He didn't get better. Nothing changed for him. His life didn't did King Saul instantly die and he wasn't being chased anymore? There was no change to anything. The only change that you find in verse number 5 is a change in David's heart. That's it. I've found that most situations in life, if you are a man, you come to every thing and situation, you want to fix it. You come to your kids, you're like, I'm gonna fix them. A lot of times with, especially for the young guys here, before you get married, if you marry and think, hey, I'm just gonna fix everything about my wife, that's not what they want, and it is an impossible deed. All right, I'm just joking. Sorry, honey, but we can't come to every situation and every person like we can fix them. We can't. David just had to say, but I have trusted in thy mercy. So he chooses trust over doubt. He chooses trust over fear. He chooses trust over everything else. David is going to choose trust. He says, my heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. He chooses to rejoice. Last week I was thinking about it, but when my mom passed away, we went to the hospital, and it was just a strange time, but we sang. She was no longer there. She was in heaven rejoicing with the Lord. I remember at her funeral, they had a big choir at this church, and the choir sang, but I just remember rejoicing at my mom's funeral. I mean, I could have chose a lot of things that day. I would tell you that day it was different for me. I was sad, but David said, my heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord because he hath dealt bountifully with me. Psalm 69, let's turn there. Psalm 69. You're like, okay, David had one bad day. Psalm 69. Listen what he says. Save me, O God, for the waters are come in unto my soul. I sink in deep mire where there is no standing. I am come into deep waters where the floods overflow me. I am weary of crying. My throat is dried. Mine eyes fail while I wait for my God. This is a pretty powerful picture, isn't it? He feels like he's drowning. Some of you, maybe it's not today, but there will be a day where life is too much, and you get to that point where you're like, I feel like this is too much. I am drowning. I am sinking. He says, where there is no standing. I am come into deep waters where floods overflow. They overflow me. He's like, I don't know if you guys feel like this, but sometimes, there's that verse, you'll cling to that verse that God won't give you more. And then you're like, this is more than I can handle, but it's not more than he can handle. David's come to a point where it's more than he personally can handle. He can't fix it. He says, he's like, I'm weary of my crying. If you've ever been that person where you have no tears left, you have cried yourself, and you have near no tears left. He says this in verse number 4, they that hate me without a cause, and more than the hairs of mine head, they that would destroy me, being mine enemies, wrongfully and mighty, I restored that which I took not away. Just something that caught me there. I'm supposing that David's not bald, because he says, they that hate me without cause are more than the hairs of my head. He's like, a lot of us sometimes, you're like, I've got somebody who hates me. If you ever get a chance, you might get, if God calls you to preach, there are some times where you have multiple people who hate you. But that's if you're lucky enough to be a preacher. But David said, more than the hairs of my head. That's hundreds of maybe thousands of people who absolutely hate David and would take his life. And so he feels this weight on him. He says in verse number 5, O God, thou knowest my foolishness, and my sins are not hid from thee. Let not them that wait on thee, O Lord God of hosts, be ashamed for my sake. Let not those that seek me be confounded for my sake, O God of Israel. Because for thy sake have I borne reproach, shame hath covered my face. I am become a stranger unto my brethren, and an alien unto my mother's children. He's like, hey, I'm disconnected from everybody. I'm disconnected from my own family. You find here, it says, the zeal for his house has eaten him up. He says, verse number 9, reproach has fallen on me. Verse number 10, when I wept and chastened my soul with fasting, that was to my reproach. I made sackcloth also my garment. I became a proverb to them. They that sit at the gate speak against me, and I was the song of the drunkards. He was mocked by people. And so you're like, maybe that's a little. Let's jump over to Psalm 109. Psalm 109. This is kind of like what we remember about David is like, I would call it like Facebook. Because Facebook is just what? Highlights from your life. This is the good thing that happened. We went on a vacation. Oh, we went out for a meal. Everything's going great. And when you guys are on social media, which I would say would be wise to not be, but when you are on there, all you're looking at is people's highlights. You're looking at the Sunday school stories they teach. David killed Goliath. David became king. David defeated the armies. David did this. That wasn't David's whole life. You don't and I just do want to tell you this. The opposite of that is if you're like, hey, I'm going to be an honest social media person. I'm just going to talk about how life's horrible, and I'm not recommending that either, all right? But realize that that it really is. When people say fake book, that's really what it is. It's fakeness that is put out there before all people. And so we kind of think that that's other people's lives. David, Psalm 109, verse number 22. It reads this. For I am poor and needy, and my heart is wounded in me. I am gone like the shadow when it declineth. I am tossed up and down as the locust. My knees are weak through fasting, and my flesh faileth of fatness. I am become also as a reproach unto them. When they looked upon me, they shake their heads. Now, I do want to tell you, there is prophecy here, but I believe also it is also a picture of David in his life. David felt overwhelmed. He was in extreme pain. He was in suffering of mind. The Bible uses this word sometimes, anguish was in his mind. You see that uneasiness of pain that it produced from his life. And then you see this in 1 Samuel chapter number 27. If you'd flip back there, 1 Samuel chapter number 27. In the world, the world gives the worst advice many times. There's like these little cliches that the world says. One of them that they throw out there for us, and people will tell their kids sometimes, is like, just trust your heart. I'm like, the Bible says that the heart is what? Desperately wicked. When would you ever tell them to trust someone? Hey, I know this guy who's desperately wicked. You should go get some advice from him. You can't trust sometimes your own feelings, your own heart. And 1 Samuel chapter number 27, verse number 1, and David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. And Saul shall despair of me to seek me any more in any coast of Israel. So I shall escape out of his hand. And so you get this picture that he is escaping. He's going to to go to this. And this is what I would tell you in this story. He listened to his fears over trusting God. This becomes a crazy time for David. He escapes to the Philistines, and then you come down through verses 2 through 12. It says, and David arose and he passed over with 600 men. And it says, verse number 3, they're dwelling there. Verse number 4, as you just walk down through these 12 verses, you see like all of this stuff that begins to happen in David's life, and it leads to compromise. Many times when our minds get to a bad place, they lead us to a bad place. It leads to compromise. I was talking to this young man. I sent him all these verses today, but I know he probably, because he's like, I wonder if it's just David. Turn, if you would, to Job chapter 7. Job chapter 7. You'll see this same picture that Job keeps asking God. Chapter 7, verse number 19. It says, "How long wilt thou not depart from me, nor let me alone till I will swallow down my spittle?" He's like, God, how long? You don't need to turn to all these, but chapter 8, verse number 2, he says, "How long wilt thou speak these things, and how long shall the words of thy mouth be like strong wind?" Job 18:2, "How long will it be ere ye make an end of words?" And then Job 19:2, he says this, "How long will ye vex my soul and break me in pieces with words?" Job's stuck with this like how long thing. I don't know about you, but when we go through trials, that's kind of like one of the biggest questions, isn't it? I just want to know when it's going to end. For me, if it's we're on a hike, I just need to know how long. How long will it be? You know, how long will it take us? I can prepare my mind many times if I know, hey, this is how long it is. Then you prepare your mind and you know. But what about when you don't know how long it is? When you don't know how many days it's going to last, when you don't know what you're going to have to go through, you have this thing like David and Job crying out like, how long? Habakkuk says this in Habakkuk 1:2, "O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear, even cry unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save?" So Habakkuk is the prophet, and he says, again, how long? How long am I going to have to go through this? How many days? You see, David said in Psalm 13, "How long wilt thou forget me?" Moses, these are just prayers that they pray in their distresses. Moses said this in Numbers 11:15, "And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of my hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness." Have you see Moses' prayer? What's he saying? God, just take me out. Now, if I'm just honest with you, there were probably some times in my life where I've cried out to God and said, God, I'm like of no value, no good. If you've never been there, then maybe you've not felt maybe like the pressures of all kinds of things, but you get to that point sometimes. A few times it was the stomach virus. All right. I am a weak man when it comes to stomach virus. So if you ever hear that I have it, realize I'm praying Jesus takes me home. All right. That's just a common thing. But in our minds, like, Moses is a hero of the faith. And he's praying, God, take me home. Elijah, 1 Kings 19:4, he says this, "But he himself went a day's journey in the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. You see the next prophet? He's like, God, take me home. I'm not better than my fathers. I'm struggling in this life. You see Jonah in Jonah chapter 4, verse number 3 says, Therefore now, O Lord, take, I beseech thee, my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. Now, I want to tell you, let me just give you just the different situations. Moses felt burdened, just the burden of life, and asked to die. Elijah, this is what's strange about Elijah. Elijah just had a great victory. I mean, he slaughtered like all these prophets of Baal. It's like he is on top of the world. Like, man, he's the man of God. Like he just saw this great miracle. Fire came down and burned this. And then just one lady says she's going to kill him, and he takes off, and he runs for his life. He gets so like down that he cries. Jonah was just angry that God didn't respond like he wanted. He was just mad at God. Sometimes I think for some of us, we can get mad at God because he's not doing what maybe we want. And then here's Jonah. He's like, man, it would be better for me to die than live. Let me just give you some things here, and then I'll be finished here tonight. I don't want to be very much longer. Some reasons why these guys like struggled with these things. One they were physically worn down. I don't know about you, but some of the times where we struggle the most spiritually is if you get physically worn down. You're working tons of hours. Your home life is crazy. There is a link between our emotional and spiritual state and just being like physically tired. How do we know that? Jesus on the cross, and even in his humanity, now he didn't have sinful flesh, but he started asking questions, didn't he? Why hast thou forsaken me? Physically, there is something that happens to us. You see, Moses, he was physically exhausted from dealing with that just large group of people, dealing with their problems. I find it odd to me, and I hope this is not me, but there's a lot of preachers who, one, they die of heart attacks. And so, I think about my family history sometimes, and but just the stress of people, the burden that can be on you. Moses was leading this large group, and there was like so much stress from that, dealing with that large group. Elijah was exhausted from emotional and physical stress. Like he just like takes off. Sometimes like I know for us, like there at church camp, it is like a spiritual high. Like you're just like so excited. I come back on Friday and I'm like, if I didn't see another person the rest of my life, it's just this high and then this low. Kathy could tell me, like from years of being a youth pastor, it would be like Thursday night, I'm hugging all the kids and like, man, I love you. We're praying together. And on the bus ride home in the morning, I'm just like, I can't stand these kids. I don't know why I'm a youth pastor. God has judged me. But by then, we stayed up all night. I'm physically exhausted. I'm not myself. Elijah was physically exhausted. I think about Jonah. Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of a whale. He gets out, and then he has to preach this message of repentance all over Nineveh. Now, I don't think Jonah was by any means like this great picture of what a prophet should be. But I do want to tell you, Jonah was tired. He was sitting out in the sun. He was physically tired. Some of us can be so judgmental of people, and then his shade that he has, God sent for some reason VeggieTales has messed it up for me, but but his shade's gone because God took it away, and physically he's just like, he's done. We need to be careful, like physically. You see that Moses was overwhelmed just mentally. Elijah felt isolated and fearful of Jezebel. Jonah was angry and disappointed about the outcome. I mean, these are all things that we struggle with in our life. I see that Moses, if you want to see the spiritual problems, is that Moses took his eyes off of God and focused on his burdens. Isn't that how we do so many times? Like, man, I'm just like struggling. Preacher, if you just knew what was going on in my life, if you knew the struggles I was having, if you knew like the pressure that I have, I would tell like parents, the teenagers are in the back. But like my kids will come to me sometimes, when they've been in high school, it'll be like, Caden will be like, Dad, if you knew how much pressure was on me about basketball this year, and he's like, struggling with things. I'm like, you don't know anything, like you just start like going off on him. Wait until you get a family and you got to pay bills, and that's like the parental. That's a parental mistake. I just want to tell you, because to him, he is feeling pressure from those things. I would say this. He just doesn't realize. Making a basketball team or like putting food on the table, like there's a different level, like are you going to make it through the week, or you don't feel like going. There's different levels, but I don't want to make it less for them because it's their personal stress. But I would tell the parents here, if we can't teach our kids how to deal with the stress when they're younger and how to keep their focus on God, how are they ever going to keep their focus on God when they're adults? How are they ever going to keep their eyes on Jesus Christ? Moses took his eyes off God. Elijah focused on his fear rather than God's power. I mean, can you imagine that Elijah was afraid after he killed all those prophets and fire came down from heaven and burned up? Like, Jezebel says to him, hey, I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to be like, I'm sorry about your luck. You're in trouble. God's probably, you better check yourself. Like, what is God going to do? But that's not what he did. He got wrapped up in what? His own fear. Jonah was concerned more with his own feelings than God's compassion. It was more about him than it was about God. As I see these people that struggle, that's just like I feel like sometimes when preachers preach, they just preach like highlights, and I do want to tell you, they preach like a false gospel to you. They try to put you as, you're like David, and the situation in your life is Goliath, and God's going to give you the victory. You're going to, I just want to tell you that is not how to read the Bible. It's just like, you're not the hero of the Bible. Jesus is. We're not the centerpiece of the stuff. Does he want to help you and want you to conquer these things and do a great victory in your life? Absolutely. But you're just not the center of your life. You're not the center of the world. You're not the center. And so sometimes if we can just get our eyes back onto the cross and say, Jesus, like, if you want me to suffer, I'm willing to suffer. I trust you. I want to keep my focus on you. I want to keep my mind fixed upon you in your word. Tonight, we'll just have some time of prayer. We're not going to have music or anything like that. But maybe God's gotten a hold of your heart, and we just need to take some time alone and say, God, I need to get my focus back right. I can't stay here. I don't want to get, or maybe you've come out of that place and you're like, hey, I don't want to get back to that place again. I don't want to get consumed with those thoughts. I don't want to get consumed in that place. I may one day, you're like, I was joking with someone today about the old ticker, like the old, I think it was like Sanford and Son. He would always be like, he'd act like and I was joke about that. Maybe one day that happens with me, but I will tell you, for the most part, I just keep praying and God just keeps giving me freedom. Someone here gets mad at me, like, I can't. The only thing I can do is like preach the word and love people. I can't be consumed with the weight of everybody. Now I want to bear one another's burdens. There's some guys, Terry Neal's in the hospital, and I visited him a few times, and I want to be there to bear burdens with him, but none of us can be the Lord for anybody. It's God. We just need to point one another. I come to pray with you at the hospital or your home. I just want to point you to Jesus. I'm not your hero. He's our hero. And so tonight, maybe we need to come back to the point and say, God, give me peace in my heart and mind. Let my trust, like David said in that psalm, but I trust in you. I'm going to trust you, God. Let's bow our heads tonight and pray.